I hope everyone is doing well. Today we are going to sew together our next project. It is the cupcake apron. It is on page 101 in your Fabric by Fabric 1 Yard Wonders. So the materials that are needed for this pattern, you need the pattern in the envelope on sheet 2. You need a yard of quilted weight cotton fabric, 1 spool of your thread, 3 yards of rickrack, 12 by 12 scrap of fabric for the cupcake pocket, 4 by 9 scrap of fabric for the frosting, and a 9 by 7 scrap for front panel facing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to measure, mark, and cut. So I'm going to go ahead and locate my pattern here in the book, and we'll get started. So I got my pattern pieces cut out. It looks like I have 3 different pattern pieces for this project, and the rest are rectangles just like our bag. So we'll go through, read, so you can measure and mark what each piece is. So the apron center is 11 by 21, apron side is 11 by 34, etc. on the page. So what we'll do, just like we did last time, we're going to go ahead and measure, mark with a pin, and then once we get it all measured, we'll cut it out. Alright, I was able to get everything cut out that needed dimensions. The only one I needed the pattern for was this shape right here. So I went ahead and did that. Now I have my scrap fabric pieces that it calls for. I love these little things. They're called fabric quarters, or you can call them fat quarters as some people call them. These are wonderful, and these are at Joann's Fabrics. They're 99 cents, but this is going to be enough little accent fabric for my cupcake apron. So I'm going to go ahead and get those cut out now with my cupcake pattern and icing pattern. Okay, so I have my apron pinned and my machine is ready to go. If you need a refresher on how to thread your machine, check back in those videos I made before. If it doesn't say a seam allotment, you're always going to use 5/8 of an inch. So in this case, we're going to sew with 5/8 of an inch. And remember, at the beginning and the end of your seam, you do your front and back. Reverse stitch and forward stitch. Stop. I'm going to take out my pin. Get those threads out of the way. And I'm good to go. Stop, take out my pin. Okay, first one done. Now let's move over here to the next one that we have pinned. And ready to go. And as you can see right here, you have a nice seam right there and another seam right here. So hopefully you caught it before I did, but the second part of those instructions say to start each seam a 1/2 inch down. So all I'm going to do with my seam I just did is I'm just going to snip a 1/2 inch down the snip that thread that I did. Okay, so now I've got it at a 1/2 inch down, and I'm going to press out my seams with the iron. So our next step is to press the seam allowances open, and I have my ironing board set up. So to press the seam allowances open, I'm just going to flatten out the seam just like this. It looks like this right now after you sewed it. Okay, but we're going to flatten it out, and I'm going to do that on both seams. And normally you wouldn't leave the salvage edge on there like I did, but I know that at this point I'm going to do a 5/8 inch trim or a seam hem right here, so I know that I'm going to be folding that under. So I was just saving room on my fabric. Okay, so there's both of our seams pressed out and ready to go. Okay, so the next thing it calls for us to do is turn and press the side and bottom edges. We're going to do 1/4 inch to the wrong side, just as the picture looks. So I'm going to take my 1/4 inch seam gauge. I'm going to measure that 1/4 inch as I'm ironing. In the end, as you're ironing, you can also go ahead and you're going to set, it says to do a 3/4 inch, so I'm going to move that to 3/4 of an inch. Fold it over that much more as I'm measuring. I'm going to iron. So essentially, you're folding, you're pressing and folding twice so that it's going to look more like that and you will not have a rough edge at all. So let's get started. Okay, so I've done one edge. Here's what it looks like. See, I've got my inside first one and then second one. So let's do the rest and then we will pin in place. Okay, I was able to get everything ironed and pinned down. So this is what it ends up looking like. Now, before we sew this, our next step is to actually put our rickrack on, and we are going to do this on the front side, and it says to measure 5/8 of an inch up. That way, as you pin it, it will also catch the edge of this, and you will basically be putting on your rickrack and hemming at the same time. So let's go ahead and flip this over. Okay, so we want to make sure and do it that 5/8 of an inch from the top, and I'm going to go ahead and start on the edge right here and measure my 5/8 from the top. So I'm going to be placing it over just like that, and it's just enough to where I can catch my back seam as I'm stitching on the rickrack. Okay, start with your gross edge. Go ahead and just start with it off of the fabric so that you can trim that off and catch it in the seam later. Okay, so we're going to go all the way around and pin on our rickrack, being sure to catch that underneath, and then we will sew. Okay, so I'm almost done pinning. I did want to show you a couple of tips and tricks. So as you're pinning, I've reached the corner. All I'm going to do is fold that towards me, and it makes like a little loop just like that as you're making that corner. Pin right there, and that's also how you're going to end up sewing it. And then I am at my last edge right here, and I'll go down and out. Now, if you're like me, you probably ran out of rickrack about halfway through, or you will when you pin. So all I did was fold over, and as I sew, I'm going to tuck in these edges so it matches up and it doesn't take away from any of the other shapes that the rickrack made. So I'm going to be folding that under as I stitch all the way through. So after we are ready, it's time to top stitch the trim in place. And we're going to catch that, so we'll go ahead and start with our rickrack. I'm just going to double check that mine is catching the back edge, and if you can tell, it is catching the back edge of that hem. So we're basically doing two things at once. We're top stitching the rickrack and we're sewing our hem. So I get to the corner. You are going to do one of your pivots here so that we don't miss a stitch at all. So as I come, I'm going to find the middle of the rickrack right here. Put my needle down, keep my needle in, come from the presser foot right here, turn, and then start back. Okay, now you have your nice rickrack sewn on, and then everything's cut on the back side, your rickrack and your hem completed. Nice job. All right, so in this next step, you are going to essentially ruffle up your apron sides and the body. So to do that, you need to do a based stitch. And all that means is that you're going to make your stitch longer. To do that, it's different on each machine, but on my machine, I have a computerized screen right here, and it's telling me my stitch length is on 2 or 2.5, which is normally what it needs to be on. In our case, to do a base stitch, we need to lengthen our thread. So I'm going to press up, and I'm going to take mine to about 4.5. Some of them have a dial that you turn to do your stitch length. Some of them look like this. Each machine is a little different, so just read on what your machine needs. So I am going to do this first seam on this body here. Now, since we're doing a base stitch, in order to be pulled and to ruffle it, I do not go forward and back, because this is to help me gather my fabric. So all I'm going to do is sew straight, and my stitch is a lot longer. And if you can tell back here, see, it's kind of already bunching up a little bit. That's what we want to do. So I'm coming through, I'm going to go all the way across this first piece. And remember our 2.5 inch seam that we left, where we left it split. This is where I'm going to stop so that I can ruffle this part. Okay, now I want to leave those long so that I can pull them here in a little bit, and I'll show you. Okay, so I've done that one. Now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do my middle piece. Okay. No reverse stitch. Okay, here's my little 2-inch notch again. So I'm going to come right through here. Oh, let me flip that under. And all the way off. Okay, pull that strong and up. Okay, now as some of you probably figured out on your first project, you have to troubleshoot a lot because sometimes your machine will come unthreaded, different things will happen. So in my case, my machine just came unthreaded right now, so I need to come through here and rethread. And your machine will give you instructions on how to do that. Okay, so that was that one. Now I'm on to this edge. Last piece. Okay, nice job. Now we're set to go ahead and do the gathering. So we are going to pull the threads to gather the apron side pieces to 6.5 inches. So I'm going to start over here. Got my tape measure ready. But see these threads that we have, all that's going to happen is you're going to be able to pull those. So as I pull the thread, do you see how it's ruffling it? Okay, so you kind of got to pull and gather really easily so that you don't break your thread. If you break your thread, you're going to have to end up putting another base stitch in there. Okay, there we go. Now I've got it going. Okay, it may take you a second to get it going, but you're going to do that whole edge until it measures 6.5 inches, and the middle needs to measure 5. Okay, so I think I got my 6.5 inches there. My thread broke at the end. I'm going to gather it a little bit and pin it so it'll stay right where I need it. So got the whole little ruffle done, one piece at a time. So looking good. Okay, so your next side is to pin the apron center section to the front panel and then also the sides, and you want to do this with right sides together. So I've got my ruffle here. Here's my panel piece right here. So I'm going to take a side and put it right side together right here on this first side that I made with the 6.5 inches. Okay, so from there I'm going to go ahead and pin. I'm going to do several pins, and you want to make sure that you have it gathered enough so that it's all the way to the seam right here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and try this one again. Gather this up. Probably the more pins, the better on this part. So it might be a little difficult, but it can be done. Okay, so there's my first side. That's how I have it all gathered and pinned to the side of my apron. Okay, now I'm ready to do right sides together for the middle part of my apron. Okay, so see, I have my side. Now I'm on the middle. Once again, lots of pins will be very, very helpful as you're doing this. Go ahead and find my edge seam, pin that one first, and then adjust my gathers. Okay, so I have the side and I have the bottom. Now I get to come over here and attach the last side. Same thing, more pins, the better. Okay, now got my whole piece cut and pinned, and now I am ready to sew. As I sew, I'm going to do the pivots in each corner so that I don't have a hole in my apron. Actually, I'll do this way. Now this one you do want to do forward and back. You need to make sure that you go ahead and change yours back to 2.5 or 2 for your stitch length. You're doing an excellent job. Let's keep this going. Okay, I'm almost to my corner. As I get to my corner, I'm going to put my needle in, set it back down. So I've done one seam here, and now I'm ready for the bottom of my panel piece. As I'm going, I'm just making sure that I'm pulling the skirt part underneath so I don't end up catching that in my stitches. So make sure you're doing that as well. Okay, hand wheel, needle in, up, and that's our last pivot. Arrange your skirt so that it's underneath, and we're ready to do our last one. Forward and back. There we go. Trim. Okay, moment of truth. Open it up, and it looks pretty good. We got our cupcake part right here, and we're ready to move on to the next step. Okay, so now we're back at the iron. Here's the back of my ruffle apron. I'm gonna go through and trim a little bit of all of this off. That doesn't necessarily say to do that, but I'm going to trim that off, and then we're going to press this to the center of where your cupcake is going to be. Okay, hopefully that kind of cleans yours up a little bit. This, and now I'm just going to press it towards the cupcake so it lays flat. Okay, so now we have it nice and pressed, and it's a little bit cleaner. You can also go through there. I'm going to go through there and clip up all of my loose threads before I move forward, just to go ahead and get those off of there. All right, once we've trimmed and pressed it, your apron should look a lot cleaner now. Okay, our next step is to fold and press the bottom and side edges of the front panel lining, and we're going to press it a 1/2 inch to the wrong side first. Okay, so I'm just going to fold it I'm gonna fold it a 1/2 inch over and iron it just like that. Okay, so now I have all of my sides pressed in 1/2 inch. Okay, this next step says for you to pin your folded lining piece in place and then hand sew. So I'm going to add some pins. And we will be good to go. Okay, so now that I've got it held in place, I'm going to start down here on this end. Put mine through, my knot catches, and I am going to go catch a little bit of it and come around. A little bit and come back around. I have to take that pin out. Caught a little bit and I'm bringing it back through. So as you can see, there's my couple of stitches. So now I've got the inside looking a lot better, covered with covering all your ruffles. Go through, cut any extra threads that you may have, and just make sure you're kind of cleaning up your apron as you go. Okay, so the next step is our straps, and the book actually has us doing our straps where we sew them right sides together and then flip the whole thing inside out. And since it's so long and skinny, I'm not going to do it that way. We don't have a turner. I didn't ask you to get a turner. So there's other ways you can do a strap, and this strap is going to be more like the one that you just did on your bag, okay? So all you're going to do is fold each side over one. Okay, fold it over about a 1/2 inch, okay, 1/2 inch on both sides, iron, and then you'll iron in half, okay, and then we'll do a top stitch on it just like our bag that we did. Okay, so let's go ahead and iron those, and then we'll be ready to sew our straps. Okay? Okay, so once I have it ironed like that, then I'm gonna go ahead and fold it in half and iron. Now on one end, you're going to want to go ahead and open it back up, fold this end just like that, because it's going to be the end of your tie that we see. And then get that back in your fold. Okay. Okay, so we have our ties done. Now I've grabbed the waistband, and what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to put right sides together, and I'm going to pin. Okay, there's one. Okay, then I'm going to grab my other waistband, or tie, excuse me, and put right sides together on this side, and pin. Then from there I'm going to go ahead and stitch this first one. I think I'm going to turn it over so I can see what I'm doing. There we go. Okay, so I've done that one, and if you can see, that's what it looks like on the other side. I'll come over here and let's do this side. Okay, so here's my stitch this way and right there. Okay, now what you need to do next is you're actually going to take your waistband just like this, and you're going to take the top side. Okay, this is the bottom. You're going to take all of these sides, even the waistband, and press them in, or even the ties, excuse me, and then press them down, top and side. Okay. Okay, now that you have your waistband ironed, you're ready to attach it to your apron. So we're going to take the raw edge here and attach to your apron here, and it is supposed to go over onto your apron a little bit, okay, onto your sides, but you want to make sure that you get it centered here and pin. Let's stitch along the top after we have this pinned. So I have it pinned. Let's go ahead and sew. see, you fold it up and you have a nice little line right here. Okay, so now that you have your waistband on, you have your edges that you ironed and pressed down. So you're going to go ahead and fold your waistband over with your pressed side catching that seam allowance, so it'll be nice and pretty in the back. And then we're going to go ahead and sew all around these 4 sides, or 3 sides. So we'll go ahead and pin and then you're just making sure underneath here that it's catching that seam allowance so you're not seeing that seam. Okay, there we have it pinned and then pinned on the back, and you're almost done with your waistband. Let's go ahead and sew this. See how we did? So we've got our backside stitched and our front waistband done. Okay, so you have the main part of your apron made and you've done a great job so far. I will be back with how to put our cupcake pocket on the front of our apron.